So welcome to another episode of the Contractor's Bible. I'm your host, Alex Berg. Today we've got a great guest for you with over 30 years experience in concrete restoration and waterproofing. I'd like to welcome Jesse Puckett, founder and president of Titan Restoration, to the show. Jesse, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
So as the leader and owner of Titan Restoration Company, Jesse is a results-driven leader with a long record of achievement in meeting the needs of his clients. He leads an organization in developing and implementing business strategies, allocating resources, and coordinating efforts to ensure streamlined and cost-efficient solutions. Having started as a laborer in 1987, Jesse is the type of leader who has done each job required to build a successful business. In 2002, he and his wife, Anita, decided to take all of that experience and serve the DC metro area by opening Titan Restoration. They've become a regional leader in complete building restoration, repair, maintenance, and preservation services for anything from a foundation to a rooftop. So, a lot of success over the last 30 years. So tell me, what originally drew you to the concrete restoration business?
I was looking for a job. I was 16 years old and I was doing some carpentry work. I was doing some punch out work for a home builder and was laid off unexpectedly. It was just the end of the day, 3:30 in the afternoon. Boss said he didn't have anything for me the next day. And that was kind of scary. So the very next morning I left for work. Except I didn't have a place to go. So I went just knocking on doors. I went looking for now hiring signs. And I found a restoration company. And I went inside. My brother was with me. He was in the car. I was driving a 76 Duster, leaking oil. Went inside, asked for a job, and they told me I had to be 18 to get the job. So I went back outside, got in my car. Brother said, "What'd they say?" He said, "You have to be 18. He said, "When do you turn 17? I said, "Turn 17 in 2 weeks." He said, "Go back in there and tell them you turn 17 in 2 weeks, or you turn 18 in 2 weeks." So I went back in there and I said, "I'll be 18 in 2 weeks." He put me to work right away.
Really?
12 years later, I decided to move on, but that's where I started learning my building repair skills.
So do you remember the first day on the job, what you were doing?
I remember the first day. It was sheet metal. I was cutting and soldering sheet metal. It was the company did exterior building restoration, including masonry and waterproofing and roofing. And the roofing division, the sheet metal division, was hiring. And they needed someone to solder galvanized steel. Because to do that, you had to breathe these horrible fumes. So nobody there wanted to do it. And I was eager to do anything. So yeah, I remember the very first day. I did everything that they had asked. I was cutting sheet metal, soldering sheet metal, and at the end of the day, I stayed and swept the floor. I was just grateful to have a job.
Just happy to be there making a paycheck.
Yes.
Amazing.
$7.50 an hour, I remember.
$7.50 an hour.
$7.50 an hour to get in the business. Yeah.
Incredible. So fast forward a little bit. We're gonna make a big jump here, but fast forward 2002.
Okay.
Decided to start your own business. You've spent all this time from 87 to 2002. So was that 15 years about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What made you decide to go out on your own?
The original job I had, I was pretty innovative in what I was doing. I was finding ways to do things faster and easier. And the people I was working with had the mindset of this is how we've always done it. They really didn't want to make changes. They wanted to continue to do things the way they always had done them. And it was hard for me. I just couldn't bring myself to slow down my pace. The result was some of the veterans, after 10 years of employed at that company, some of the veterans that were much older and had much more experience were being sent to my job because I was being assigned larger projects, larger and higher profile projects. And that created some animosity. And the more I applied myself, the more the veterans dug their heels in. There was a competing company that was lobbying for me pretty hard for years. And I was dedicated to the company where I was at. I wanted to retire there. I was appreciative that they gave me a shot. I was grateful that I was able to grow there and learn some skills. I wanted to end my career there. But it was clear to me that wasn't my best option. So I took a management position at another company. And the guy was not a good leader. He tried to run people out of fear. He used fear to push his people, and he wanted me to do the same thing.
That never worked long term.
It did not work, and it was not. I just knew in my gut it was wrong. And this is over 20 years ago, but to give you an example, we were looking to fill a position. We were willing to pay $16 for an hour for the position. And the gentleman come in with experience, he wanted 18. So I went and talked to the owner. He was my direct boss. I went upstairs and I told him, I said, hey, I got a guy downstairs, looks like a good candidate. He has the skills we need, but he wants more than we're willing to pay. He said, what's he want? I said, he wants 18. He said, give it to him, give him 20. And I was perplexed by that. He said, don't you understand, Jesse? Give him what he wants. 2 weeks later, you approach him on the job and tell him he has oversold himself. And then you cut his pay to where we want him to pay, where we want him to be. But we'll just let him work here long enough to cut the ties. So I went downstairs, shook the man's hand, and I said, sorry, I don't have anything for you. And he left.
Wow.
And my boss, the owner, was extremely upset with me over that. And but I was going to do what was right. So eventually I left that environment. I was working 7 days a week. The boss told me, said, you hit these marks and you can have all the autonomy you want. You complete your job. Do you want to go fishing Friday? Go fishing on Friday. Well, I hit my marks. I completed my jobs, but the bar continued to raise, kept raising the bar. My kids were young, and my wife was bringing them to the office on Sundays so we could have lunch together. So that's the kind of lifestyle I was living. I was at the office, 4:45 every morning, staying there till 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, 7 days a week. And my wife was ready for me to make a move, but it was hard. It was hard to make a move because that's where I gained my self-worth, taking care of my family, providing for my family. And I knew that I could do it there. I didn't know what it looked like to be a business owner.
Sure. You hadn't been in that spot before.
Had not been in that spot. I had done some little things. I'd mowed some grass. I'd done some roof repairs on the side. So I knew what it was like. I knew I could go out and knock on someone's door, earn their trust, and then solve a problem and build a relationship. I knew I could do that on a small scale.
Sure.
I didn't know that I could raise my kids and pay a mortgage on that and have a secure future. So it was scary. My wife had no doubt. She knew.
So it was an easy conversation with her when you finally got over that fear and said, I'm ready to do it.
When I said I'm ready to do this, she got a notebook and started writing out lists of names. What are we going to call it? She was that on board.
She was in from the beginning.
All in before I was.
It's important if you have a partner like that they're really supportive of what you have to do, because when you start a business, you got to work 7 days a week sometimes. You got to put those hours in to get it going and get it off the ground. And what's great is it seems like even from a young age, from 2 weeks before you turned 17, you had that work ethic where you weren't afraid to stay extra and sweep the floors and do what you had to do in order to be successful.
Yeah. And working 7 days a week, apparently I didn't mind. It was a lot easier once I was doing it for Titan Restoration.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a lot easier. It was easy for me to do it at my previous employers. But I really didn't like the way the guy leaded his company.
Sure.
I didn't like the way he treated his people, and I wasn't going to stick around and try to change him, change who he was. He was a successful person. So I just decided to change my environment instead.
So as you've had your business now for about 18 years now, right?
Yes.
What's been one of the best investments that you've made in your company? So what's something that you use that, you know, is you couldn't go without, whether it's a software or a piece of equipment or something that sets you apart?
My biggest investment is people, and my biggest mistakes were people. But as far as equipment goes, I like buying equipment. I like trucks. I like aerial equipment. You know, we scale the sides of buildings. And I remember buying my first suspended scaffolding equipment, and what a huge mistake it was.
Really?
I thought I was getting a great deal on some used equipment on a company that went out of business. And the equipment was a little older, but I was getting so much of it for such a great deal, and I was spending so much money on rental equipment, I purchased it. And the equipment was unreliable. So I laid out this cash, thousands of dollars in cash, and I still ended up renting almost all of my equipment.
So that's a great lesson learned there.
That was a huge lesson learned for me trying to, I was spending $1 trying to save, trying to save a nickel. I was spending $1 trying to save a nickel.
Sure.
What I learned there. So I no longer do that. We buy new equipment. And if we can't buy new, we just continue to rent.
Sure.
So.
Okay. What's some, I actually, before we spoke on the phone, I spent some time in the concrete restoration business as well. So I remember I still drive past this one building in Miami, this 20-story high rise in Miami Beach. And every time I drive past it, I look at it, I spent 6 months of my life hanging off the side of that building.
Yeah.
So what's one project that you've done that you can remember is like one of your favorite ones, whether it was an interesting building, the design, or just one of the bigger projects? What's one that really sticks out to you that you're pretty proud of?
One that sticks out, we've done some really nice buildings, some historic churches. I've worked on some churches that were built in the 1800s. We do a lot of historic buildings that I'm very proud of. The one that stands out to me the most is in 1987, when I was hired in the business, and I told you I was doing sheet metal and I was soldering. I was actually soldering these ornaments that looked like British flags. It was manufactured out of flat sheet metal. They were cut in patterns, bent, and fabricated out of about 10 pieces. And I was bringing these things to fruition from sheet metal and then installing them. 10 years ago, I went back to that building and I did a major restoration project on it. Part of the restoration project was to pull these large ornaments that were about 30 inches by 48 inches. They were pretty large, and there was 108 of them in the parapet wall at the entire perimeter of the building. Part of the restoration was to pull them out, strip the paint, repaint them, and put them back in the building. And for me to be on that building, for that to come full circle, was a lot of fun. It meant a lot to me.
That's pretty cool. That's a great story.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So what's you've been in the business for a long time. You started from the bottom. You've worked your way up. Uh, Clearly, from the story of your old boss at your old company, it seems like you're a great leader and you treat people with respect. What's some bad advice that you've heard in the industry?
Some bad advice.
Maybe a specific way of doing a type of waterproofing or a type of job, or you know, I'm still blown away by the bad advice that was given to you by your old boss of give him what he wants and then come back 2 or 3 weeks later and cut his pay.
You know that you just stumbled on something there. That was really bad advice. But I've always I ask for advice, but I usually preface it with, please don't get your feelings hurt if I don't use it, because I'm the one paying the consequences of my decision.
Sure.
So I really want to hear what you have to say, but I'm just telling you now up front, I may not use it. And so maybe that's why I really at the moment can't come up with some bad advice that I put into play. I haven't put into play bad advice so that it's made a strong impression on me.
Yeah.
But just hearing the bad advice might be that day that my boss told me to pay him whatever he wants, let him cut ties, and we'll cut his pay to where we want it later. So that obviously made an impression on me, because it was one of the reasons that pushed me towards leaving, that I no longer wanted to be a part of that organization. But I can't think that off the top of my head, I can't really think of some bad advice that has really hurt me. Now, actually, maybe that's not true. I've taken some advice from some estimators to where we would outbid our way out of a project that we had a really good opportunity.
Okay.
Because we thought we had one in the bag. And the one we thought we had in the bag didn't come through. We lost that one, and the one we bid ourselves out of because we didn't think we had the manpower to do it.
Sure.
So I would say, yeah, that was bad advice that I took from within the company.
Okay.
And I'm not blaming anybody. It was my decision. Ultimately, it was my decision.
Sure.
But yeah, that was some direction that I took that I now regret.
So I always ask this question because when I sit down with somebody, what I'd like to get out of it is, a great conversation where somebody might be able to take something at some point and make a difference in whether they're looking to become a contractor and start their own business, or maybe they recently have and they want some advice, or maybe they've been in it forever and, are hearing stories like what you've told so far. But if you could go back and give yourself some advice when you were 20 years old, right? So 20 is actually a great number, great age, because you've just gotten into the business, right? You're a little over 3 years in, so you're probably not soldering sheet metal anymore. You might be doing something else in the field, some more grunt work. But what would be some advice that you would give yourself now, going through what you've been through and having all the experiences that you've had?
That's an easier question.
Okay.
The advice would be know your numbers. Know your numbers. I was a construction guy in business, and it caught up with me. I could fix buildings. I was really good at fixing buildings, and people trusted me to do it. And I didn't have to be a good estimator to do it. There was so much work available that I just stayed busy and the cash flow kept coming. I didn't really pay attention where I was making money and where I was losing money. And it wasn't until after the recession that caught up with me.
Sure.
And it was in 2013. We was a lot smaller then. And I had the company had done $2.4 million in revenue, and it had cost us $2.7 million.
Wow.
A major, major loss. My lines of credit were extended, and it was the third year that I was facing this. I never really paid attention to the numbers. My wife's an accountant. She was stressed out, but I always just thought we would turn it around. I just thought, okay, it's a bad year, it's a recession, we'll turn it around. What happened was my competition was buying jobs just to keep their people working. And I just wasn't there yet. I didn't figure that out until the third year when it hit me that this is not going away soon enough. And I had to make a decision that I was going to have to get a job or figure out how to be a businessman.
Sure. You know, you're, I think it's probably more than 50% of the people that I've talked to so far have said either the exact same thing or something very similar. Is a lot of people get into contracting because they are really, really good at what they do. And they've either worked for, like you, worked for a leader that wasn't a great leader and realized and thought they could be a better leader, or they were just tired of not getting paid enough, right?
Yeah.
And went out on their own. But then as you go, like, okay, there's a lot more to this than just doing a full depth repair or doing patchwork on a balcony or rolling up some waterproofing. There's a lot more to it.
There's a lot more to it. So I had to make a decision because my main guy, Corey, he had left the largest restoration company in the metropolitan area. They were doing all the government projects. He left that company to join my team. And I was not about to let him go home and tell his wife, his parents, his friends, that, yeah, I went to work for Jesse. I went to work for Titan, and that didn't work out. That weighed very heavily on me.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to learn to be a businessman, and I needed to start with understanding the numbers. And so I started reading books to understand how money flows through the company, how it actually works.
That's great. So I want to, we're getting close to time here. See, before we started, I promised you, I said this was going to go real quick, and next thing we knew, it'd be 20 minutes in. So one of my favorite things, I'm not a reader. I listen to audiobooks. But you said you started to read books. So I guess my final question, I have to ask this, is what's one book that you would recommend that everybody reads if they're getting into the contracting business or they want to learn about numbers and being a better businessman in construction?
There's a lot of them. Traction is one of the ones I've read recently. I wish I could look on my phone, but Traction's a powerful one.
I know a lot of EOS implementers that would be very happy that that's the one that you pulled.
Yes, and there are several.
Great.
But yeah, that one, sometimes there's books I take to my team. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is also another book that I recommend to business owners. They always say, that's my favorite book.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's a good one because people are familiar with it and they say it impacted them.
I've got a book recommendation for you.
Okay.
There's a book by a guy, his name is Greg Crabtree. It's called Simple Numbers. It's fantastic. As far as knowing the numbers of your business, making sure everything makes sense and works out well. Simple Numbers by Greg Crabtree is a phenomenal book. I wish it was on Audible. I'm a big Audible person, but that's one I actually had to take the time to read, and it was well worth it. I try and read it once a year, actually.
Good. I like the books that you have to put a note in or commit to yourself to read once a year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
About podcasts too. I love some great podcasts. I'll be happy to share some with you.
I'm in for sure. Well, look, I appreciate you making some time. Enjoy the weekend in North Carolina, and we're gonna have to do a version 2 of this at some point down the road. We'll do another video podcast like this and get an update of how things are going with you, because this was a phenomenal conversation. I really appreciate you making the time for me today.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate you inviting me, and would love to do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.